You're listening to Brainwork Framework, a business and marketing podcast, brought to you by focus-biz.com.
Talent acquisition and retention, Gen Z upskilling, reskilling. What are all these topics about, and what do we need to know so we can better prepare our business? With us today is Radina Walsh. She is the Fractional Talent Lead Business Lecturer and Advisor over at Box Advisory, a boutique consulting firm focusing on all things talent for startups, scale-ups, and SMEs. Radina, so happy to have you here. How are you today?
Thank you so much for the invite. I am excellent. Thank you. I'm enjoying the last piece of summer that we're seeing in Ireland.
Yes, it's sad to see summer go, but again, the fall and winter will come very quick for us. But Radina, you have a pretty incredible journey. You help a lot of businesses. What were you doing before, and how did that bring you into what you're doing today?
Oh, yes, I can talk about my journey on and on and on, the whole day, the whole night. So I've always been fascinated by working with people, understanding their motivation and figuring out how I can help them be better versions of themselves. So naturally, I fell into studying psychology back in the day, well, over 15 years ago. And I guess I was studying, I figured out the right path for me is something related to HR. So very quickly, I figured out recruitment really makes sense because it's dynamic. It really allows you to work with different type of people, to learn very quickly. So it's the kind of accelerator, if you like to say, in an HR career. So my background is a nice combination of executive search consulting. So I've worked in 2 international companies in completely different regions for completely different types of roles. So I was literally 22 and I was interviewing CFOs and CEOs of large companies. So I really had to jump into the serious ship very early in my career. But then fate brought me to Ireland. And I've been here for over 12 years. My life, my career is basically here. And I got super lucky and was found by LinkedIn. So I worked there for 4 years. Then I switched to another American company that we all love and know, Airbnb. Then I moved to yet another big player on the global market. And I guess within this period of time, I've had the chance to learn a lot about talent acquisition, about internal dynamics, relationships, and basically what people want in a large organization and how things should be done, best practices, but also what you shouldn't do. So 2019 came and I was thinking, now it's a great moment to set up my own business. Well, a bit of insight is that my husband actually has entrepreneurial background. So it wasn't just me one fine day deciding, oh yeah, tomorrow I will be an entrepreneur. No, I did have a fantastic backer in my husband because he knew the bits and pieces of how to establish your company in Ireland. So he did give me quite a few advice, really good tips actually. And I gave myself 6 months, because I knew I want to be completely on my own. So I was a solopreneur, as we like to call it. And in my head were 2 things. On one side, the quick wins, right? Because you're looking for kind of a secure area, risk averse type of approach, which was dealing with job seekers, with candidates, with experts to help them with their job preparation, right? Everything from preparing your LinkedIn CV and getting ready for an interview up until how to set yourself up for success in a new position. So the career consulting piece came easy because that was my bread and butter. I had been doing it for a long time, but it wasn't enough. It was this kind of game of being in the comfort zone, but wanting something else, something new, something refreshing, right? To keep my learning curve because recruitment is fun. However, if it gets repetitive at certain point in time, and I fell into lecturing. I never ever thought in my wildest dreams that I'm going to be a teacher. No, but I definitely didn't want to be a coach. I mean, I think this is very much overused word these days. Everyone becomes a coach after, 2-3 weeks of intense training, which in fairness, I don't think that's the right way. So I absolutely say that I'm everything but a coach. I'm a mentor, I'm a lecturer, and I identified for myself that I do feel quite happy when I'm in front of an audience, when I am sharing my know-how, when I'm getting feedback about it, when I'm iterating and I'm improving. And this kind of process was pretty fascinating. And back then, it was pre-COVID times, as we all know, it was the case that people were starting more and more to look for alternatives to the standard education, right? To the standard MBA or, business schools and so on for various reasons, financial or time or whatever. And I started working with a couple of business academies that were completely remote. And I thought to myself, well, I'm going to be a remote talent advisory. Up until now, so that's 5 years later, no one really understands what that means. And people are like, Radina, are you a headhunter? Are you a recruiter? Are you a consultant? What exactly are you doing? So you actually presented it very well. And what I am doing in the last few years is I am supporting the journey of small and medium-sized organizations because there's always something to do when it comes to human resources, whether it's setting up their onboarding, whether it's training the leadership team as to how to do interviews in a more inclusive manner, whether understanding remote and hybrid challenges, whether introducing mentoring programs or better hiring systems, everything in the domain of talent acquisition, management, and development. So this is my story today.
It's an incredible journey, and you have some incredible experience from big name companies and just the way that you approach your work and kind of had this itch for something more. You said, kind of reaching a limit. I want to try something different. And you gave yourself this goal, 6 months. Let's see if I can make something happen. And here you are today doing even better work and helping a lot of businesses. As solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, we have to wear so many hats. We don't know everything. And the more work that we can send off to another company, another service that can solve a big headache and a big problem for us is always a win-win, which is why you have such a great business model here. And we've seen some shifts post-COVID now. That was kind of pre-COVID. You've been in business since COVID, but the workforce, the labor force has kind of changed since COVID. Work from home, return to office, inflation with raises. How is all of that kind of changing the landscape of the workforce when it comes to attracting, retaining talent, and then ultimately building these businesses?
Yeah, and this is a big question. It probably would require a few hours of discussions, but just to summarize it, you're totally right. I think no one expected what happened during COVID. No one was prepared. Not even HRs were ready. And actually the burden was on them to handle with respect and with, well, they were expected to be with ease, but it was very complicated times. And ultimately from there were a lot of macroeconomic challenges and changes that happened. And a lot of people realized, well, I can do my job from anywhere. Why do I have to go back to the office? And now that's still a big challenge. And even some big names like Amazon are requiring people to come back to the office, and they're facing a huge pushback. Same with Google. And even outside of the tech industry, we are observing that shift in mindset. People are embracing the 4-day work week, which was a trial a few years ago. Now it's becoming pretty much trendy in a lot of countries, not just in US states. We're seeing it in Europe as well, in Asia, in Australia. So I think this is one of the next steps in terms of how the world of work is shifting. Additionally, on top of Generation Z now are almost as big as millennials in terms of presence in the workforce. The oldest one is around 28, and they're now starting to step in the shoes of the C-level executives. So guess what? They don't perceive work in the same way like we do. I'm millennial, like Generation X and baby boomers and so on. Their approach is much more flexible. Work is not the Ford standard 9 to 5, 5 days a week. You sit on your bum and then you leave and that's it. This kind of norm is evolving. I'm not going to say it's completely changing because it's going to take some time. It's evolving and they demand that. It's not just, oh, it would be nice to be flexible. No, if they see an employer that is inflexible, that doesn't respect the fact that they have other interests and other desires outside of the core work, they're just going to lose the game. these employers are completely going to lose the game. And it's a matter of time. We're starting to see that more and more, that competition now is not the top brands. Competition is this nimble, agile organizations, small and medium-sized companies that are not throwing just cash at people, but are embracing these additional benefits, perks, this freedom of choosing how you work. It's called a non-linear working hour schedule, where you might get up at 7, you work from 8 to 10:30, then you go to your Pilates, you bring your dog for a walk, you might be having some walking calls, right? And then you come back, you might have a nap or whatever, you cook the dinner, and then you have 2 hours more of work, then you collect your kids from school, and then in the evening time, you have 2 or 3 hours more. I mean, if you're still productive and if you're still completing all the projects and the tasks, why not? But it just takes a mind shift and letting go of this fear, because the fear factor is huge. Like, this is the giant that in my role, we're really trying to beat. And one of the common issues that I have with leaders, particularly in terms of embracing this post-COVID reality, is that they are afraid. They're absolutely afraid that they are not seeing people with their own eyes. They're talking about putting different softwares that are tracking if you are on the computer, if you're moving your mouse. I mean, that's Big Brother kind of scenario. I mean, everyone who has read the 1984 book back in the 80s, I mean, that's not adequate. And then last but definitely not least, AI. I mean, everyone is talking about AI, and this is not a new thing. Generative AI and how we are leveraging it, yes. OpenAI obviously started this big wave back in 2022, but we've had these tools before. They just weren't that elevated like they are right now, and the access wasn't that popular. Everyone has free access to this, and it's amazing. I mean, you can't go against progress. I see a lot of companies are forbidding the use of generative AI at work. They're banning websites. Obviously, I'm a lecturer, so I'm in the educational sector, and some colleges are basically saying if you are caught to use ChatGPT, that will, reduce your final grade or points. And I'm thinking, but this is going to be there regardless of what you do. People are smart and people will have access one way or another. Rather, establish some ground rules, establish ways of supporting this new skill, but also insisting on some level of, responsibility, adequacy, call it whatever. So I see these particular elements as very much impacting how we treat talent, how we hire talent, and ultimately, as you said, how we retain them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is crazy to see the shifts between the generations. And honestly, I'm proud of Generation Z for being able to kind of put that pressure on big businesses and corporations. It seemed like there was this unbalanced scale where the corporations had so much leverage and power and control. And now the workforce is kind of fighting back and saying, no, thanks. We'd like to do things a little bit different. They came together and withheld their own time and services. And now we're seeing a big shift. But I think that's important to find that balance. And everything you mentioned with the shift to AI, the tools that are available now, just like you said, they've existed, but they weren't quite all polished there. The types of tools that are out there now are just incredible, both for, like from a business perspective, but then a fun perspective too. From a fun side, I'm using AI to create songs. I give a prompt and it creates a full 2-minute song. And I'm like, this is incredible. It can do country music, pop music. It can make a business jingle. It's incredible. And then you see AI creating content, and it can now scan websites and create more hyper personalized cold emails. I mean, the AI that's out there is incredible, but it'll be interesting to see how it's used in businesses, how the workforce responds to it. But this is just something that the workforce will need to either adapt with, or I don't know, tell the company we want to use these tools. These can be helpful. We shouldn't shy away from them. What should the workforce be doing to kind of like level up their skill set to make sure that they're still valuable to these companies? Some of the terms here were upskilling and reskilling. I'm not very familiar with those. Can you tell me more about those?
Absolutely. And you bring very interesting topics. the piece around awareness, right? When something becomes a buzzword and everyone is talking about it, there is an element of fear, an element of, I don't want to hear about it. That's not relevant to me. I don't want to have anything to do with it. And we're not talking about making everyone excited or making everyone adopt this as something mandatory. The minute something becomes mandatory, people will struggling and they will fight against it. I honestly believe in that. But raising the awareness is one piece. Making sure that at every organization that wants to use these tools or believe that the people are using it, as you said, for any kind of creative purposes or anything to help them with admin, with tasks, they shouldn't be focusing really their time when they can elevate themselves and work on something with much more meaning. So to establish some ground rules, awareness training, to showcase some good use. And of course, I do also believe in establishing some ethical principles and not waiting for governments to establish acts or impose regulations. It should come from the business. It should really be regulated because ultimately there is a lot of damage that can be done as well. We cannot disregard that. And if I look at through the lens of upskilling and reskilling, upskilling would mean that you need to upgrade the skills that you currently have so that they don't become obsolete. Reskilling is completely changing, right? And what I have seen in the last 4 or 5 years is that loads of people are trying to reskill because they're coming from their more traditional jobs like being lawyers or police officers or hospital workers, community workers, teachers who have seen this shift to tech and being absolutely obsessed with the idea of breaking into tech in sales roles, particularly because of obviously salary, financial motivation, if you want to call it like that, customer success, customer service, marketing, digital marketing, cybersecurity, data analyst. So all of a sudden, these jobs are so high in demand that people are like, oh my gosh, I'm a teacher. What the hell am I supposed to do with my 35,000 salary? So people are taking this kind of leap of faith to reskill into something that would be more in demand, while the upskilling requires you to already have some kind of baseline, right? So maybe you are a technical expert and now you see a shift in terms of the programming languages or in terms of the different tools that your kind of function is using. So you kind of want to continuously upgrade this skill, right? To get more certifications and really expand this know-how. So both are equally important. I cannot say one more important than the other, but the approach is slightly different. It takes different amount of time. Of course, if you have a baseline, probably things will come a little bit easier, also from job seeking point of view. But if you want to be and to stay competitive, because we're not talking just 2024, we're talking about the next 2-3 years, hopefully. God only knows if we get another COVID or something like that, hopefully not. But in order for you to be proactive in your career and for your employer to kind of plan ahead, it's really critical exercise to understand skill sets. And skills are usually divided into two sections: power skills or soft skills, which I don't think is relevant anymore because they're everything but soft. They're just human skills, right? Those skills that you are born with and you can develop throughout your life and throughout your career. Things like emotional intelligence, multicultural awareness, empathy, active listening, all of these bits and pieces. And the hard skills or the technical competencies, which are more related to, let's say, recruitment or employment law or SEO or anything else, right? So for every employer out there, this kind of continuous exercise of identifying what is the current skill set in our organization in terms of workforce, what do we need in the next 1 to 2 years, and what would be the kind of future skills, right? Skills for the future. So this is why it's very important that we align as consultants with the vision of the organization and what do they want to achieve in order to be helpful, particularly in terms of defining the skill set for the future. And if you have this exercise, basically everything stems from there. Job descriptions, job advertisings, profiles, career development, learning and development programs, how you hire. Everything stems from the skill sets, literally. So if you nail this process, your next journey is how do you continuously upskill and reskill. So I did a bit of simplifying exercise for you, but happy to clarify if you have any questions.
No, that's fantastic. And what an exciting time for a lot of, startups and scale ups at this time where just by offering some flexibility or something a little bit different, is it just these bigger businesses that kind of had that leverage? Now these smaller startups can have leverage by offering the flexibility, something that these bigger companies won't offer. This is a big opportunity for people. And again, from the workforce side, an opportunity to learn more skills. There's never been as much information available online as there is now. YouTube University is a great place to even start. I'm sure you yourself listen to podcasts or watch videos, read books. So there's information out there. The more that we can learn, it definitely helps us with every single skill set that we have. Do you have like a favorite book or a podcast or any sort of educational piece that was really influential to you?
Oh, so many. And thank you so much for asking that. I am a big fan of having growth mindset, embracing a growth mindset approach to everything. And outside of the traditional certifications that I do, actually, I have a goal of at least one every year. And this year I'm already at three. So I think I managed to beat my records. But that's the mommy brain coming out of a long break and then trying not to get into a FOMO stage, fearing I'm missing out. So I do have favorite podcasts, absolutely, because whenever I'm driving or I'm going to the gym, this is a perfect way to get up to speed with what's happening. So there are a few. First of all, I'm a huge fan of Josh Bersin. He's my guru when it comes to everything human resources related. I'm also very biased to the podcast that Reid Hoffman has set up, Masters of Scale, because, well, obviously, I know the man. I had the chance to interview him once when he visited the LinkedIn EMEA headquarters back in 2015. So I actually asked him a question, and I've been fascinated by this podcast in particular. I love reading books. I do find it challenging to read only business books. I feel if I read different types of novels, and I read both in Bulgarian and in English, I always find some interesting lessons that I can apply in my professional world as well. So I love telling people that my absolute favorite book is Alice in Wonderland. It's everything but business oriented, but it has everything to do with life and how you view things in life. And so many lessons about self-awareness, embracing maturity, how to deal with different people, conflict resolution, so many different things into one book. And I know it probably sounds crazy to some people, but I would totally recommend anyone to read it and just think about it from a business context. I know it's very aloof, probably concept, but it's really worth your time. Loads of short video series or regular shows about recruitment, about leadership and management. Yeah, I think this is a good combo. Nothing too overwhelming, nothing longer than half an hour because I lose focus. I am not a Gens, but I think I've embraced already their kind of lifestyle and no time for anything longer than half an hour.
I agree and feel the same as well, kind of adopting some of those practices. Even back then, 15 years ago, I was like, this whole 9 to 5 thing isn't for me. I want flexibility. And it's good to see that the younger generation has now adopted that and embraced it even more.
Yeah, big time. And this is not going to be the end. I can only imagine what the next generation, they're called Gen Alpha. So my son, I told you earlier, he's almost 3 and he's literally swiping on every screen he sees. Even if it's like the TV, he's swiping on it. So I don't know. I'm afraid to make any kind of planning and forecasting around what they would be.
That's so funny. It will be interesting. Even my niece, when she was younger, I tried to pretend the iPad wasn't working, like, oh, it's out of battery. And she was like 1 year old and literally like pointed at the button and I pressed it, it lit up. She knew exactly what to do. It's incredible to see kind of how we adapt to technology at such an early age and how that influences us throughout our lives and careers. It's crazy.
Big time. And we can definitely do this podcast again in 20 years and talk about Gen Alpha then.
That'll be wonderful. I look forward to that. I'm going to set it on my calendar.
Perfect. Perfect. That would be 2044. Lovely. Excellent. I'll be available.
I love it. Now, Radina, where can people find out more about you, your company, your business? How can they connect with you online?
For sure, the best way to interact with me is LinkedIn. I'm the one and only Radina Walsh. Hopefully, you're going to recognize me straight away when you type my name. You can learn more about Vox Advisory and the fractional work I do on www.vox-advisory.com. And yeah, absolutely. Feel free to connect. Any questions? I am an open book, happy to interact with anyone and everyone.
That's incredible. Radina, you're a wonderful person with a lot of great experience and doing a lot of great work currently with your own business. So we appreciate you taking the time and sharing your tips and tricks and knowledge with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. All the very best.
You as well. Thank you.